It's not always loud. It doesn't always show up with grand gestures or sweeping declarations. Sometimes it's a friend who answers your text at 2 a.m. with, "I'm here." Sometimes it's a stranger holding the door when you're clearly having a rough day and feel invisible. Sometimes it's the courage you offer yourself in the mirror when you whisper, "I'm doing the best I can, and that's enough for today." That's what perfect love started to look like in my life. Not perfection, not performance, but presence. And presence, real, honest, vulnerable presence, has a way of disarming fear. Because fear thrives in chaos, in confusion, in the unknown. But love grounds you. Love brings you back into your body. It says, right here, right now, you are safe, you are worthy, you don't have to brace yourself anymore. I began to notice the way I spoke to myself, the way I punished myself for being anxious, the way I judged myself for needing rest. And I asked, what would it look like to respond to myself with perfect love instead? Not just when I was succeeding, not just when I was calm, but especially when I was messy, fragile, panicked, or broken. It wasn't easy. It's still not. But every time I chose love over fear, even just for a moment, I reclaimed a piece of myself. I stopped letting fear dictate the narrative of my life, and I started letting love write a new story, one where I was allowed to be human. That's when the transformation began, not in a lightning bolt moment, but in the quiet, daily decision to believe that love, real love, was the safest place I could land, even when I was free-falling, even when I didn't believe I deserved it. There came a moment, quiet but defining, when I realized that fear had a language, a script, a rhythm. It always started with the same two words. What if? What if I fail? What if I lose them? What if I say the wrong thing? What if I can't handle it? What if they see the real me and walk away? Fear is fluent in worst-case scenarios. It's like a relentless storyteller in your mind, always writing new chapters of disaster and self-doubt. And when you're in it, really in it, you start to mistake those fearful thoughts for truth. You stop challenging the script and start living according to it. But as I let those 6 words, perfect love casts out fear, sink into me over time, I started to hear a different voice, a gentler one. It didn't silence the fear immediately. It didn't tell me to stop being afraid. It simply spoke a different language. Not what if, but even if. Even if I fail, I am still valuable. Even if they leave, I will still be whole. And so this idea of still being whole, even if I'm misunderstood, I am still worthy of understanding. Even if today is hard, I am allowed to be kind to myself. That shift changed everything. Because what if is the voice of control. It's the exhausting attempt to predict every possible outcome so that nothing can hurt us. But even if, that's the voice of trust. That's the language of love. It doesn't deny the pain. It doesn't promise a life without loss or rejection. But it promises you'll survive it, that you'll still belong, that your worth isn't up for debate no matter what happens. It was such a radical idea to me at first, that I didn't have to wait until I felt unafraid to start living like I was loved, that I could bring my fear with me, acknowledge it, and still move forward anyway. That courage wasn't some sweeping act of bravery, but the small decision to choose love in the face of fear, over and over again. I remember walking into a conversation I'd been avoiding for weeks, a hard, honest talk I knew I needed to have, and I could feel fear tightening its grip in my chest, telling me all the ways it could go wrong. My hands were cold, my voice was shaking, but somewhere inside I heard myself say, even if this doesn't go the way I hope, I will not abandon myself. And that was it. That was the breakthrough. And that was it. That's it. I started to show up in places I used to hide. Not because I wasn't afraid anymore, but because love gave me a foundation to return to, even if it got hard, even if it hurt, even if it wasn't perfect. It was like learning to walk again, wobbly, unsteady, but real, empowered. And somehow, with every shaky step, fear began to lose its power, because fear needs control to survive. But love survives without control. And this is what I wrote. Love survives without control. Even if it got hard, even if it hurt, even if it gets worse, it was like learning to walk. It's resilient. It's grounded. It whispers to us, no matter what comes next, you will still be you, whole, loved, enough. So if fear is telling you all the ways life could fall apart, try answering with this. Even if it does, I know who I am, and I won't stop loving myself through it. That's how you start living free, not fearlessly, but loved. And that's enough. That's always been enough. There was a time in my life when I believed that strength meant silence, that to be mentally strong meant to never flinch, never cry, never let anyone see the cracks. I wore composure like armor. I used productivity as a shield. And I told myself that if I could just hold it all together on the outside, eventually the chaos on the inside would fix itself. But here's what I've learned in the most humbling way possible. You cannot heal from what you hide. And what you silence only grows louder in the dark. I used to think vulnerability was a liability, that if I was too open about my struggles, people would see me as unstable, unreliable, too much. So I became an expert at the highlight reel, always showing the doing fine version of myself, the one who was always busy, always helpful, always okay. But inside, I was exhausted, not just physically, existentially. I was tired of pretending, tired of carrying a weight I wasn't allowed to name, tired of the invisible war between who I was and who I thought I had to be. One day, after a particularly difficult night where anxiety had left me raw and sleepless, I sat across from a close friend, and instead of saying, "I'm fine," I told the truth. I said, "I feel like I'm disappearing inside myself. I don't know how to ask for help, and I don't even know what I need. But I'm not okay." And I braced for rejection, for discomfort, for judgment. But instead, she looked me in the eyes and said, "I'm so glad you told me. I'm right here. You're not a burden." And I broke. But not in the way I feared. I broke open. That moment changed me, because it taught me that healing doesn't begin when we're fixed. It begins when we are seen. Fear tells us that if people really knew us, the mess, the panic, the breakdowns, they'd leave. But love says, you are safe here. You don't have to perform to belong. You can unravel and I'll stay. That's what the verse meant when it said, perfect love casts out fear. Not that we'll never be afraid again, but that in the presence of love, we are free to show up honestly, fully, unapologetically. Love doesn't ask for the curated version. It makes room for the real one. And when we start showing up as our real selves, the healing doesn't just happen within us, it ripples outward. Because when one person is brave enough to be vulnerable, it gives others permission to do the same. I started being more honest in small, tender ways. I said things like, "I'm feeling anxious today, but I'm still showing up. I don't have the answers, and I'm trying not to shame myself for that. I need a little more kindness for myself right now." And something miraculous happened. The more I let people see me, the more I saw myself. Not as broken, not as weak, but as human. And being human is not something we survive, it's something we honor. We don't need to be unshakable to be strong. We just need to be honest. Because truth is what softens fear's grip. It's what breaks the shame that says we have to carry our pain alone. So, if you're holding back tears right now, let them fall. If you've been trying to keep it together for everyone else, let yourself fall apart in safe hands. Because you deserve to be known, not for what you do, but for who you are underneath all of it. And who you are is still worthy, still lovable, still enough. Especially in your most unguarded moments. You don't need to heal in secret. You were never meant to. You're never meant to resign, secret deep inside yourself, to solve your problems and live your life. There is a quiet moment, somewhere between breakdown and breakthrough, where you finally realize the goal was never to be fearless. The goal was to live with your heart open anyway. I used to think freedom meant the absence of fear. That if I healed enough, grew enough, prayed enough, read enough self-help books, or journaled my way into enough clarity, one day I'd wake up and the fear would be gone. That I'd finally step into a version of myself who didn't overthink every conversation, who didn't wake up with a racing heart, who didn't second-guess every decision with paralyzing doubt. But now, I know. Freedom is not the absence of fear, it's the presence of love that makes fear lose its authority. Because here's the bold truth I had to face. Fear will always exist in some form. That voice in your head that says you're not ready, you're not good enough, what if they laugh, what if they leave? It doesn't vanish just because you grow. It just gets quieter the more you trust something louder. And that louder voice, that's love. That's self-compassion. That's truth. Perfect love doesn't erase fear. It holds it. It looks fear in the eye and says, I see you, I hear you, but you don't get to steer the wheel anymore. There's a phrase I started telling myself during the hard days, and maybe you need to hear it too. Fear can ride, but it doesn't get to drive. That was the real transformation. Not waking up fearless, but waking up and saying, even if I'm afraid, I will still choose to speak. I will still choose to show up. I will still choose to love. I will still choose to live. And with each choice, each brave step forward, I felt the chains of anxiety loosen. Not disappear, but loosen enough for me to breathe, to move, to reconnect to joy. I stopped seeing my mental health as something that disqualified me from a full life, and started seeing it as the place where my courage was born. I stopped trying to become someone better and started remembering that I am already someone worthy, not in spite of my fear, but through the way I live beside it. Because the most powerful people I know are not the ones who have everything figured out. They're the ones who keep showing up, heart cracked open, voice trembling, still choosing love in a world that makes fear so easy to follow. They're the ones who know that healing isn't linear, that growth isn't always glamorous, that some days the bravest thing you'll do is get out of bed. Speak your truth, set a boundary, rest, ask for help, say no, say yes, start again. And that's what I want you to remember. You don't need to conquer fear to be free. You just need to know that fear is not your ruler, love is. And love doesn't ask for perfection, it asks for presence. It asks you to stay with yourself, to stay with your story, to stay open, even when the world tells you to shut down. So today, I invite you, not to become fearless, but to become loving, especially toward yourself, especially in the places that feel the most fragile, especially in the middle of the mess. Because perfect love doesn't just cast out fear. It builds a home inside you, where you no longer have to run, where you can finally rest in the truth. You are safe, you are seen, and you are so deeply loved. Right here, as you are. Let that be the beginning. Let that be enough. So if you're listening to this today and you feel heavy, scared, or stuck, I want you to know you are not broken. You are becoming. And love, it's not some far off thing. It's in your next kind breath. It's in your decision to stay. It's in the hand you reach for when everything feels too much. Let that love cast out the fear that says you're not enough. Let it sit with you on the bathroom floor. Let it walk you back to yourself.